Hello, everyone. Sorry, everyone. Apparently I had no sound there for a moment. I'd forgotten I muted them. Oh, I hope that hasn't reflected some of today's recordings. I doubt it has. Anyway, I'm sure they've got sound. I'll have to check them. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Let's see. The delay was because one dog, me and my sister both took a dog for a walk, and one didn't. One dog returned which hadn't rolled in anything. One dog returned which had rolled in something. And despite the fact I was the one who returned with his dog which hadn't rolled in anything, I was the one who ended up doing washing. Hello, Nautical Wolf. Hello, Vision. Hello, Night 6831. Hello, Wayne Borean. We only did one 11 a.m. start, and that was when we were doing HMS Dreadnought Day. All praise the letter day via Blame Lane. Really, Calvin Gosberg? Hello, John Bitchon. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, Albazaski. Hello, DG40. Hello, Shumi. Hello, Zachary Gherkin. Jonathan Burrow again. Oh, hello, Colin Cameron. Hello, Jamuth. Lots of people saying sound. Check mic. Hello, Night Current. Charles Beresford would probably oppose the hood being built. Charles Beresford would oppose anything being built. Hello, Albazaski. Mic is not kaput. That's now working. Hallie car. Hallie other stage. Perhaps deliberate to get around the YouTube profanity rules. Well, it did get around me singing Happy Birthday to Lord Charles Beresford, although it wasn't intended to. So you can just imagine at the beginning that the opening was me singing Happy Birthday to Lord Charles Beresford. Hopefully I'm not near and still muted. No. Are we expected to lip read for this episode? Paul Beswick, that would be fun, but no. Glad you can hear me all now. Oh. So you didn't have to hear me singing Happy Birthday, Lord Charles Beresford. I deserve this after today. Today has been a fun academic day, and if we get to talk about it tomorrow on Bilge Pumps, you will hear about it all next week. Because I have had a fun week of people doing academic gatekeeping. And I am just about reaching the point at which I'm going to start doing actual, not physical bodily harm, because I'm not that kind of person if I don't have to. Basically, for that to come about, you have to either be imminently going to inflict it on people I care about, or actually be inflicting it on me. But there is certainly a level at which I reach the point at which there are going to be pranks. How's Ian Richards? Yes, it's the Duke of End of a class for your birthday. Beresford, a complete concrete. What would I describe Lord Charles Beresford as? Okay, I'm going to say this. One of the things that did get muted out was me apologizing to people in advance, because some people have watched me do videos on this period, and they have decided I'm either angry or drunk. The strongest thing I drink is Iron Brew, which is a soft drink. It's non-alcoholic. Most of my day I've spent drinking water. And no, I'm not angry apart from at these admirals. I am, however, incredibly sarcastic by virtue of not only just being British, but being the particular variant of British I am. Let's put it this way. You mix Scottish together with Cornish, then you add in a dose of Liverpudlian, a dose of a couple of other things, and you all mix together and you raise in the home counties as a scholarship boy at private schools because of dyslexia, and you will get someone who is incredibly sarcastic as not only a defense mechanism, probably, but also as an entire character and personality. I'm not saying sarcasm is a feature of my personality. It is my personality. I am sarcastic. Hello, Wayne Brian. Stuffing your pipe with green leaves. I would have thought that plank was a far better term for Beresford. Tempting. So, Lord Beresford. He marketed himself as Charlie B, or aka the Living John Bull. He's born the 10th of February, 1846. So today, believe it or not, and you should believe it, is very, very, let's see, he would have been today 54 plus 122 is, by my counting, 176 years old. He died in 1919, age 73. And yes, before anyone asks, in answer to your earlier point, Knight 683, or one of him trying to oppose Hood, he did oppose Hood. I haven't read the correspondence myself, but a friend of mine confidently tells me that one of the last papers he wrote to the Admiralty was to critique them for building more battle cruisers. Actually, to critique them for building more battleships at all. He felt they should be just building... I'm not sure what he was talking about at that point. He didn't want to build submarines. That's what, a checklist of areas historically oppressed by the English. To be fair, the Cornish are English and have done quite a lot of the oppression, although they do consider themselves slightly separate. I'm also fairly sure Liverpool is technically English, but they do again consider themselves slightly separate. It's an interesting world. And as for the Scottish, well, this is the point I can say because of family and relations. Anytime anyone starts to say, Scottish oppressed by the English, I have to get kind of quiet, because mostly the Scottish, in my experience, seem to be oppressed by my family, who were Scottish, and doing the oppressing. Because, they didn't like the other Scots, and the English were prepared to pay them money to beat up the other Scots, so that's what they did. In Polish colloquialism, if someone is a concrete or stuck in concrete, as he's unable to move forward or learn anything new. Oh, no. Beresford was able to learn new things, just not exactly what you want. He was also not necessarily as bad as you'd think in some respects, but was worse in others. Will Condor go popper during this live? We will hope not. Jennifer, having read a rather thick book about Beresford and his feud with Fisher, I would describe him as a self-aggrandizing jerk. That's polite. Colin Cameron, the majority of the empire was built by the Scottish, Cornish, and Welsh. Yes, this is the thing. What most people don't realize is the English, technically, or rather the Normans, mostly build an empire in England, in the British Isles. And then mostly the disparate parts of the British Isles go elsewhere to build a larger empire because they want to get away from everyone at home. Oh. I should probably have identified Highland Scots. Yeah, that's my family. We were Highland Scots. We didn't like the Lowlanders and spent most of our time. But we were Protestant Highlanders. So, yeah, we didn't like the Jacobeans and we didn't like the Lowlanders. And basically, we didn't like our neighbours at all. At one point, we're just randomly raiding them. Okay, just don't get into my family history. The family Bible is basically a history of we beat up these people, this people, this people. Then we decided it was time to move. Once we got there, we established a nice little house, and then we beat up these people, and yeah, you see a common theme going on here. Massey was kind because Massey is a kind person. In Carr, not sure the Cornish would generally consider themselves English. Well, yes, we have our own flag in Cornwall, and we have our own kith and kin and all these things, yes, but we don't actually have a problem with the rest of England. This is the thing. We have a problem with Devon. We don't have a problem with the rest of England. The Devonians, they can go themselves, but the rest of England's fine. Don't get into that one. So, anyway, that's enough about my family history. It's Lord Beresford today. And Beresford is... Well, the term I'm coming up with for him is Fisher's foil. Because he is the anti-Fisher. But actually, also in the nicest way, as much as I dislike Fisher in some ways, and I mean, when I say I dislike him, it's not sort of I'm anti or hate him or anything like that, but I think Fisher could have done things better, and I don't think he always thinks things through, and I think he could have made better choices in some ways. I would prefer to spend any amount of time with Fisher versus Beresford. Beresford does all sorts of things which I find personally, morally, and as an officer absolutely reprehensible. And the fact that he gets promoted is entirely down to his connections. And it just drums home the point that Fisher made when the Fisher-Selborne scheme was being talked about, that at this point, Nelson wouldn't get into the Royal Navy, but Beresford would. Senator, my family history, farming for 500 years in the same place. My family used to farm any locals they turned up with. At one point, they were farming, I think, Norwegian fishermen. We'll leave that to one side, though. There is a sort of point of family history that we might have done a reverse Viking at one point, but no one's quite sure about proving that. But we might. There is a rumor that some of the Scottish members decided that if the Vikings were going to come raiding them, they were going to go raiding the Vikings. We're never quite sure about the history of whether that's accurate or not. Oh, they're an interesting family. Anyway. Sorry, I needed to giggle about my family after this last week of gatekeeping. Or rather, dealing with people doing gatekeeping. Right. So his father was John Beresford, who was the 4th Marquis of Waterford. He was an Irish peer who inherited his title from his childless brother. He'd been educated at Eton, Trinity College, Cambridge, and entered the Irish Church, was an incumbent of Mulgarbach, County Armagh, and Pevensey of St Patrick's Cathedral, serving under his uncle, Lord Charles Beresford, at an Anglican Archbishop in the Irish Church. He married Christina Leslie, who seems to be an upright and very nice lady, and they had 5 sons. Unfortunately for John, all his sons he deemed non-viable for the church. In fact, it's not that he didn't think they were smart enough, he didn't think they were morally smart enough, also actually physically smart enough for the church. So none could inherit his real role. So he had to start finding up with suitable careers. So his eldest son, John, joined the Lifeguards. Always a good place to go. Send him to the Lifeguards, and would eventually succeed to the family estate and titles in 1866 on the death of John Beresford. Charles was his second eldest son, and he, of course, went to the Navy. Perfect career for a connected young man who is of bullish intent. William joined the Ninth Lancers, was awarded a Victoria Cross in the Anglo-Zulu War, and became military secretary to several viceroys of India. Marcus joined the 7th Hussars, became an equerry to King George V, and it was in charge of the king's racehorses. Very good. Naval decided that, frankly, he didn't want to keep trying to get himself killed, and decided that he would rather become a rancher in Canada. That's what a non-insignificant part of my family history is about, trying to get the English out of power in Ireland. To be fair, the real power for the English in Ireland was always the Scottish settlers. So, without much ado, let's consider Beresford's early career, and even before he gets to Marlborough. How do I put this politely? He could trace his family history back hundreds of years. And he'd been captivated by the sight of the Channel Fleet at the age of 12. He joined the Royal Navy in 1859, age 13, following preparatory education at Stubbington House School. He started training the cadets at HMS Britannia. He managed to pass out from Britannia in 1861, the age of 15. He is then immediately appointed as midshipman to the flagship of the Mediterranean Fleet, the steam-powered three-decker HMS Marlborough. This is what he was serving on in 1861. In car, no sisters, no. I do feel sorry for Charles's mother, because she has 5 sons and not a single daughter. And they are 5 tearaway sons, and tearaways in some respects. Next thing around, so he opposed HMS Hood. I want to bet he almost certainly opposed HMS Dreadnought, HMS Invincible, and the carrier Argus. He opposed pretty much everything which wasn't a cruiser. Yep, this is a steam-converted ship of the line HMS Marlborough. Fair, that's the one area my family didn't really go doing fighting, which was Ireland. We mostly just married Irish girls, which has always surprised me because I'm not a redhead. But there are a lot of Irish girls married into my family. Anyway, that's, again, off the topic. I don't mind going. As I said, it's nice a bit sometimes to wander off topic because it does help me decompress after a weird day. Now, he doesn't really have the most normal career. Okay? He is deployed to Marlborough, which you would expect to be an absolutely plum posting. It is a flagship in the Mediterranean Fleet. So it's the flagship of the Plum Fleet, the absolute best fleet in the Royal Navy at this point. And you would expect him to be absolutely overjoyed. He is serving under the command of, in 1863, did it memory, don't fail me now. Yeah. He serves under Sir William Martin. Who was good friends with his family, was good friends with the Conservative Party, which will be a big part of Beresford's career. And, he was very supportive of him. Yet, honestly, he doesn't seem to have taken advantage of it for his naval training. He really doesn't take advantage of these things. His next deployment is HMS Defence, which he spends most of his time writing letters home to letters to various people complaining about. He is a midshipman, and he spends the entire time, it seems, instead of learning his craft, writing letters of complaints that he's on a slow, ugly ship. Which, and I will point out that I have found only one quote for this. He is specifically described as a slovenly, unhandy tin kettle, which could not sail without steam, and which took minutes instead of seconds to cross top-gallant yards. So, his problem with it was that it was a steamship, not a sail ship. He managed to get into debt while aboard this ship. Gambling. Okay? He gets into debt. And his father consults Admiral Eden. Eden arranges for Beresford's transfer. This is the other thing. If a midshipman got into debt, and they were not as connected as Beresford was, and it was brought to an admiral's attention, how long do we think they'd actually be in post? They wouldn't be given a plum assignment. He is transferred to a steam corvette, HMS Clio, where he would be the senior midshipman. And this was hoped to develop his sense of responsibility. That is the idea. Oh, no. He's a wonderful young man. He's a lord's son. I can't remember. This is the thing. I am pro-monarchy. I am a monarchist quite happily. I much prefer having a monarchist head of state than a president in the UK because, frankly, I've met our politicians. I don't want anyone having feel they have to swear oath of loyalty to them. But there are times I look at this system, and there are nobles who would absolutely turn in their grave if their child was behaving this way and would never abuse the system using their titles. And there are people who do. And there always is that case. But Beresford just gets so many chances, which would ruin a career, not even today, but then, if it'd been anyone else. In card, the HMS Photo Marlborough in photo Grand Harbour, Malta? Yeah. I say, okay, why the frigate does he forget they need the battleships and battlecruisers? A cruiser was alone. No, he didn't want destroyers either, Knight 681. Okay, you're missing out things. He didn't want this. I said the only thing he seems to support is cruisers. He doesn't want battleships, battlecruisers, aircraft carriers, destroyers, anything else, pretty much. So he gets promoted to go to HMS Clio, where he is the senior midshipman. And they are sent to visit the Kingdom of Hawaii to escort the Dowager Queen Emma to Panama for a visit to London. On the 21st of April, 1865, Beresford, along with two of those other midshipmen he is in charge of, decided to pull a prank. They stole the wooden American Eagle sign from the gate of the legation of the United States Minister to Hawaii, James McBride. They are discovered to have done this by Captain Nicholas Edward Brooke Turner, the commanding officer and captain of the ship. There is a formal diplomatic demand to return the sign by the American legation. They were ordered to apologize to the Americans, return and reinstall the sign the next day. I can't think why the sign, it gets all sorts of bad press in America, this, and gets looked at terribly in its terrible behavior. Now, here's the point. I'm just going to make this one little point here. There is actually a drawing of them putting it back up. There you go. And I'm going to disappear. Well, I'll move Mars and Cleo around. Hello, Cleo. So, this is a picture I'm putting up. Again, he's a senior midshipman. At what point does his career survive? How the frick does he go on to be an admiral? There is crashing your ship while manoeuvring at high speed and exercises. And there is literally getting so drunk that for apparently a bet with a young Hawaiian lady, you go and actually carry out a international incident. Okay, this is one bit. This is not sailors doing this. This is trainee officers. There is actually cartoons put together of them putting it back. Oh, Cash, damn, I was walking late to Charles Beresford. Good evening. If an admiral gets news from a midshipman, that midshipman is bound to be out in the Navy. This is the point. Sure, we will develop his personal responsibility by giving a better post after he messed up. That's pretty much what they did. Oh. Not all. Am I the only one thinking boo-hoo-hoo, do your job and suck it up? That was what I was thinking earlier. Let's put it this way. During this time, he actually meets a young Hawaiian lady, Nancy Wakinapu Sumner, who was one of the Queen Emma's court ladies, and they become friends and continue their friendship through correspondence for many years. We'll be getting back to that at some point. But I just wanted to point it out, and I even have a picture of her at some point coming up. Abzalski, how old was he at this point? Well, in 1865, he would have been 19 years old. So, yeah. Okay, he's not massively old, but he's been in the Royal Navy since 1859. He's been a midshipman since 1861. You would expect him to have enough maturity to know he's not supposed to commit a diplomatic fricking incident. He didn't get any floggings. In 1865, he's first transferred to the steam corvette HMS Tribune, which I don't have any picture of. But that was commanded by Lord Guildford and considered one of the smartest ships in the Navy. Whilst there, Beresford was promoted to acting sub-lieutenant in January 1866. And a month after that, in February 1866, he was transferred to the steam frigate HMS Sutlej. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. The flagship of the Pacific Squadron. So he's been on Marlborough, the flagship of the Mediterranean Fleet, and now he is on Sutlej, the flagship of the Pacific Squadron. This is a picture of the officers on the ship in 1860s at some point. I don't think Beresford is amongst them. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think it's amongst them. Hello, Melanie. Oh, how is he still a midshipman? Oh, right, nepotism. Yeah, this is the only way this guy's getting anywhere. Sherlock, and he didn't even cause it like this one with the French. If you're going to cause one, make it with the French. I know! The French, the Royal Navy wouldn't mind. They'd promote her for that. She was a very pretty Haitian lady. I'll be getting that in a second. Did this guy fall upwards all the way to the Admiral? You're gonna get start of a point of why this guy really annoys Fisher. You might be starting to get the opinion. Fisher, who has to come from a poor background and fight his way up by earning his way all the way up there. And then there's Beresford, who basically gets promoted because he's in the right party. Colin Cameron, was this before or after the US did the hostile takeover of Hawaii? Before. I was asking, where are the lovely steam frigates and corvettes? Anyway, so he's on the subject, and that's a nice career post. It's from there. Whilst there, he passes seamanship examination to qualify for lieutenant, which is kind of interesting the way the examination is carried out. I'm not saying there was any fiddling going on in that examination, but as a rule, it seems to be rather stuffed with a lot of admiral staff, but that could just reflect which officers were actually well and available at the time. It could just be me looking at it and going, that seems to be a lot of officers who don't do a lot of navigating in charge of that exam. And then he went and did a gunnery course at Excellent. That's, of course, in Portsmouth Harbour. During his gunnery course, Beresford broke a bone in his foot whilst dismounting a gun. This injury would cause him pain for the rest of his life. From Excellent, he goes to HMS Research, where he starts up another letter-writing campaign about how terrible it is. Again, and now he's a sub-lieutenant. It's 1867. He's writing letters to people saying how terrible the ship is. HMS Research is a perfectly fine, as far as I can see, for its time, ironclad warship. It's a sloop. It's sort of an experimental platform as it's trying out concepts of armour and armament. She had only been launched in 1863. She'd be laid up in 1878. So it's the last couple of years of her life. But honestly, she seems to me a fine little ship for that period. Although, there are some reports which do back him up by saying that that she was probably the very worst vessel, both as a fighting machine and seaboat, that ever went out of a dockyard of any nation pretending to a maritime reputation. But that's written in 1865, and by 1876, most of these things have been balanced out. They worked out the trim issues, they worked out the balance issues and the spaceship issues and got it right. Anyway, so now again, if you're a sub-lieutenant writing letters of complaint to everyone about the ship you're on, what do you think is going to happen to you? Now, I'm sorry, what do you think would happen in the modern Navy if someone in the US Navy of equivalent rank did that? Was writing letters of complaint? They'd probably find themselves posted to a shore posting and working out their very short remainder of their career in that short posting before quietly realising that their career was going nowhere. Beresford, he gets posted to Her Majesty's yacht, the Victoria and Albert. He's pointed to her in the summer of 1868. It is sarcasm coming through, but there's also... This is not a guy who's installing me with great joy at his career. Okay. In car, is this tolerance of gentry midshipman normal? Not really. Most midshipmen do not push it and actually do this sort of stuff. So it's kind of absurd. This is not what a regular midshipman would be doing. This would be what would be called a problem case. Try using Google Translate to work out pronouncing stranger foreign names. I did that with English to Serbian. It didn't work out well. Nice again. This is a guy opposed the hatred of the car. I'm calling him now, but invincible. In fact, getting blown up to pieces. Beat him to the punch. He was basically opposing everything. Oswaldski. I can imagine Admiral Fisher and a bridge of Riculo steaming at full speed over 30 knots. That gentleman waving a sword and shouting, "Bring me closer! I want to hit them with my sword." Possibly. Hello, Jack Ray. So, also not competent enough to safely handle a gun? No. Squad. The opposition of Nelson's examination, where his admiral rank, unclear if I remember correctly, didn't reveal his connection to Nelson until after he passed with flying colours? Exactly. Hello, Dan Freeman. You're missing my blood pressure. John Barrow, my family's in research as a gunner. Not even 40 minutes in, and I already despise this guy. To be honest, you start to feel sympathy for Fisher at certain points, and Fisher was arrogant as anything. And I have great respect, but the thing is, by now, when I was doing Fisher's one, I was talking about the contribution he made to the Navy and the thing he does. No, this is just going to go downhill from here. This is not a good point. Colin Cameron, is someone changing his assignments often hoping he will fall asleep? I'm fairly certain captains are trying to get rid of him. I am starting to get the honest appreciation, the idea that basically captains are going around going, "Hey, we're going to play poker. Whoever loses gets Beresford." Because he doesn't even stay on Victoria and Albert, a plum posting for long. No. He goes to HMS Galatea next. Now, she's a steam frigate, and she's commanded by Queen Victoria's son, the Duke of Edinburgh, for which the Duke of Edinburgh, HMS Duke of Edinburgh, the cruiser, is named for. And tours the world. Witnessed executions in Japan, got tattooed, and on a visit to the Kingdom of Hawaii, again in 1869, he proposed to Nancy Walakanapu Sumner. Wahinikapu Summer. The lady on the right. Left. That's left as I'm looking at it right. So, yeah, this one. I think. Yes. But she turns him down. Basically gives him the whole "it's not you, it's me" speeches, from what I understand it, because they keep talking and they remain friends. And actually, to an extent, this is one of his few redeeming features. He does seem to stay friends to her, even when she drops out of favor with the royal court in Hawaii and all those things. He still keeps up a correspondence, and he is friends with her. That is one of his few redeeming features. It might be the fact that she might have been his true love as far as he was concerned for his life. I honestly don't know, but yeah. That's what he was up to in 1869. He was touring the world with the Queen's son on HMS Galatea and proposing to Haitian royalty. Hawaiian royalty, I mean. No, sorry, totally not a prestige posting. Yeah. Does good. Beresford is the equivalent of a World of Warships player who gets to tier 10 without ever actually winning a battle. Yep. And without winning a battle and without paying for it. So they magically get to tier 10 without ever putting any money in and without ever winning a battle. Actually, did this guy do anything good for the Royal Navy? He claims to have been involved in the selection of the Grimsby trawlers, which we'll get to. We'll get to some of the stuff he does later. So, in 1874, he returns to the UK. He actually became a commander in 1875. So he was still a lieutenant when he gets promoted, becomes an MP. And I should probably add, he did also get married in 1878, but that's a little while away, and we'll be talking about that in a second. So in 1874, he enters Parliament as a Conservative MP. He also gets chosen as one of the 32 aides to accompany the Prince of Wales on a tour of India. Queen Victoria objected because, frankly, she considered him a bit of a lowborn character in terms of his effect on the princes. But the prince insisted that he was invited. It was this tour, of course, which famously created the dinner jacket. After allowing after the prince insisted on people dressing for dinner, but allowed the concession of cutting off tails of their evening coats, creating what was called the dinner jacket. And he was aide-de-camp to the Prince of Wales from 1875 to 1876. But of course, most interestingly, of course, is his short time actually in Parliament. Because he's still in Parliament, still technically an MP while he's on tour in India and all sorts of other things. And for some reason, the Lords of the Admiralty object to having a junior officer standing up in Parliament criticising the Admiralty policy. I can't think why. And at this point, the Admiralty is pretty much gunning for him. And it's because the Prime Minister at the time, Benjamin Disraeli, and later on first Earl of Beaconsfield, decided that, frankly, I don't want to lose his seat. Basically has to tell the Admiralty to calm down and tell Beresford to it. And that's how Beresford survives. So Beresford's entire parliamentary career is survived because Disraeli doesn't want to lose his seat. What's interesting is Disraeli does make this clear to both the Admiralty and to Beresford. that he personally thinks Beresford is not worth it, but his seat is worth it. The phrase seems to be, your seat is worth more than you are. You have value as a bum in a chair, that's it. Or as a vote I've pocketed while you're off in India with the future king. Hey, Shomac, got a new job. Cool. Jack Wright, lol, warships tier 10, 100% Stargate issue. Congratulations. Falling upwards, I see, yes. That's it. The Aaron gunning from his understatement. It was. There are quite literally admirals out hunting him, trying to hunt him down at one point. Okay, so the reason he could become an MP is because he's the second son of a lord. So he has a courtesy title, not an actual title. He gets a proper title thanks to King George V, because he rather likes him. Okay, Doc, please tell me Fisher shows this guy to find the points of doxing. No, Beresford, for some reason, managed to avoid Fisher in his junior days. I consider it probably good for Beresford's survival. I'm fairly sure Fisher would not have tolerated him. I think Fisher might have had an accident with him. Ian sounds like the RN are very close to the Tories. Honestly, the RN weren't that close to the Tories. And again, Fisher is basically from the Liberal side, and is very close to the Liberals. The Royal Navy is always very good at balancing it, and they honestly don't like it when they have too many people from one side, one political view in the party, because that one political view in the Navy at the top ranks, because that limits freedom of movement and freedom of interaction, in that makes sense, and making the case for the Navy. Shomac, did he find any jewels? Because that's what people like this tend to fight them. I haven't found much of a history of dueling. He doesn't seem to have actually got into any duels. He came very close, but not with any admirals. He came very close with this gentleman. Yes, Prince of Wales, later on King Edward VII. Yes, somehow he manages to upset King Edward VII. You know how he does that? Because he has an affair with this lady. This is one of the reasons why I have to say I really don't like him, and well, this is personal things. But he gets married in 1878 to Ellen Jeremiah Gardner, daughter of Richard Gardner and Lucy Madashlow, in England. He has two daughters. They would be the Honourable Eileen Theresa Lucy de la Beresford, who died in 1939, and the Honourable Kathleen Mary de la Beresford, who was born in 1879 and died also, it seems, in 1939. So both sisters seem to die in 1939, 20 years after their father, who died in 1919. So, he has got married in 1878, June 1878. At least one of his daughters is born in 1879. I am not quite sure whether the other one is a second child. Anyway, we know that by 1891, he's in an affair with this lady, Frances Evelyn Daisy Grenville, Countess of Warwick. We know it's in 1881. We know it's a serious one because a letter is found written by the Countess to Beresford, and this letter comes into the position of Beresford's wife. She lodges the letter with her solicitor. George Lewis, and threatens to use this to destroy the reputation of the Countess and of her husband if they don't stop having an affair. The Prince of Wales, who is potentially also another paramour, or at least very close friend of the Countess, it's often described as had a special affection for, tried to have the letter destroyed. But the solicitor said, no, I know you're the king, but you can't, you're the Prince of Wales, actually, at this point, but you can't order me to destroy this, and this is I'm protecting this for my client. The Prince of Wales, as he was at that point, then decides he doesn't exclude Charles Beresford, he doesn't exclude Evelyn. He tries to exclude Charles's wife from his circle, the social circle. So he sends invitations only to Charles. Now, at this point, Charles suddenly starts getting angry with the prince over this, and extracts a written apology from the prince for doing this. This leads to the prince eventually writing to Beresford's elder brother, the Lord Waterford, this is John, who had inherited the title, saying that he could never forget and shall never forgive the conduct of your brother and his wife towards me. Here is the thing. How does he still have a career after this? How? And I know, I can already tell there is going to be at least one person commenting below this, the shouty man's up again. But this is just, please, why? Wayne Boring, my opinion of King George just took a nosedive. Yeah. I'm not sure of the month, but they were married in June 78. And I think the daughters don't seem to have been. Well, let me just do a search on who's who, because that sometimes brings it up, even though I did a search earlier. She's born in May 1879, so no, they're far. That's a post-marriage, because let's be honest, it goes January, February, March, April, May, and so 4 months before that would be September, October, November, December. Yeah, so she's so they got married in June, they conceived in September. That's more information than I really wanted to think about when it came to Beresford's life with his wife, but you know. Oh. It's as always quite interesting, and I think her and her sister might have been twins. I'm not sure, but one dies in September 1939, the other one in June 1939. And both seem to have roughly the same ages. Might have not been twins, I'm not sure. The dates aren't on there for the other for Ellen, Eileen, and so they could be twins. They could be Irish twins. That's the old expression I always heard from my mother, which was the way when you did twins the hard way by having two babies in the same year. Let's take it. How this guy avoided the execution by ship's main gun battery, I don't know. Well, he doesn't just avoid it. He doesn't just avoid it because... So, from 1878 to 1881, he had been second in command on the Royal Yacht HMY Osborne. In 1882, he was the commander of HMS Condor when she took part in the bombardment of the Egyptian War of 1882, bombardment of Alexandria during the Egyptian War of 1882. He then joins the staff of the Gordon Relief Expedition, under, of course, Garnet Wolseley, in charge of a Gardner machine gun, which he was very attached to. It was a wonderful weapon as far as he was concerned. I don't know if any of you have seen a Gardner machine gun, but there is an actual photo of one on Wikipedia, and it's always fun to get these things out. If I can find it. There we go. I find if I upload all the photos beforehand to this lovely program, it causes trouble on XSplit, so I have to upload the pictures and download them during the actual lives. Anyway, this particular gun is, how do I put this? Developed by William Garner of Toledo, Ohio, who'd been a captain of the Union Army during the American Civil War. After producing a prototype, he went to the Pratt & Whitney Company, who, after a year of development, produced the military version, which was sold all around the world. In fact, the Admiralty purchased the right to produce the weapon in England themselves, so they could build it themselves. Which leads to a rather fun scenario where the Army ends up having to buy machine guns off the Navy, but we'll leave that to one side. Anyway, he's really keen on this gun and sings its praises. However, during the Battle of Abu Klea, the dervishes actually overrun his Gardner gun when it jammed at the last moment, and Beresford just escaped death by diving under the trail of the gun. So, in 1884, he just about escapes dying. Seneca, was he a good officer who sometimes messed up, or was he generally incompetent? I have no idea how to honestly answer that without sounding sarcastic, but even if he's a good officer, there is the level of the muck-ups, okay? Colin Cameron, the Gordon Relief Expedition, is that not where Churchill did his cavalry charge and was acting as a newspaper correspondent? Did they meet? They don't seem to have met. Either way, there doesn't seem to be much love lost between Churchill and Beresford. In fact, one of the few things Churchill does quite well as First Lord of the Admiralty is argue we're back with Beresford on a regular basis. Anyway, so, after this, and please note, let's consider all these ships he's commanded. he hasn't really had anything big that he's actually been in charge of. And this might explain why he ends up being very affectionate towards certain types of cruisers, because in 1889 to 1893, he commands HMS Undaunted. Now, Undaunted is actually quite a pretty ship, and I think deserved probably a more efficient officer as a captain, but leave that to one side. She has two single 9.2-inch guns, Mark V's, and that's 234mm for those who prefer it in new money. 10 single 6-inch, 152mm guns, 6 single quick-firing 57mm Hotchkiss guns, 10 single quick-firing 3-pounder 47mm Hotchkiss guns, and 6 18-inch torpedo tubes. She had a top speed of 18 knots, a range of 8,000 nautical miles at 10 knots, and she did that all on 8,500 indicated horsepower. However, there is a small problem. The ship was launched 1890. When it's launched and completed and put on the sea, it's put straight under command of Captain Charles Beresford, and she serves in the Mediterranean Fleet. In 1893, she has an accident with the then Rear Admiral Charles Beresford aboard because she's flying his flag. She strikes rocks on leaving Alexandria Harbour because of an error by the ship's navigation officer, who gave the order to turn to port instead of starboard. The ship received minor underwater damage due to the impact. Yep, the first time he gets a decent new ship, then that he can blame it on the navigation officer. Also, in this time, he's elected to Parliament again as the MP for Marylebone East. Yes, if you are wondering at that point, he basically goes from being MP to being the captain of Undaunted. It's the way of getting rid of him the Navy chooses, because they can't seem to fire him. The Carl goes back. Any daily reports of his daily performance survived? Not as far as I can find out. However, he was always pushing for greater expenditure on the Navy, especially on those parts of the Navy which he felt should be expended money on, which seemed to be very different from those which most of the admiralties thought they should have money to spend on. In 1886, he actually became the Junior Naval Lord, which was also sometimes known as the Fourth Sea Lord and Chief of Naval Supplies. He holds this post briefly because he's an MP and he's a member of the Navy, and so they're prepared to try and use him because they think maybe we should have him in trying to... Basically, there is an old saying which comes to you either have someone standing outside the pot putting water in the pot, or someone standing in the pot putting water outside the pot, is how I'm going to explain it for my little cousins to hear. And basically the Admiralty decides, let's try the latter, see if it makes anything better. All I will say is he resigned his seat in protest in 1888 because he doesn't feel the 1889 Naval Defense Act goes far enough to increase naval spending. But there is an argument that it was actually passed because of him actually resigning, because that added up pressure, because he was such a well-known character by this point, thanks to his exploits in Sedan, and, well, basically being an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm trying to be polite, but it's quite hard sometimes with this guy. Churchill was on the second expedition to Ceylon in the 1880s. The Gordon Relief Expedition was in the 1880s. Yeah. But no, the Churchill and him don't seem to meet before then. I was answering that question. Zachary Grant. It's probably because nobody trusts him with anything bigger than a cruiser. He gets a cruiser, he crashes it. Can't trust Dervish pilots to get it right. Yeah, that's good. Would an otherwise good officer with Beresford record of frigating up a successful Beresford, or would they end up sailing a desk in charge of rigging stone frigates? I'm fairly sure if they didn't have anywhere near Beresford's connections and ability to apparently blackmail Prince of Wales, or at least insult the Prince of Wales and get away with it somehow, they would have got nowhere near where he's got to. No, it Undaunted stayed afloat. It didn't sink. Anyway, so just to be even more happy and, just for even more fun, in 1898, he's promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral. And again, he's been promoted. As said, he's been promoted to Rear Admiral, and he in 1898 he again enters Parliament and representing York. Though he spent much of his time in China representing the Associated Chambers of Commerce rather than his, how do I put this, voters in York who voted for him apparently. In fact, he spent 100 days in China, and then on his return spends 31 days writing the book The Breakup of China, published 1899. He resigns from Parliament in January 1900 to become the second in command of the Mediterranean Fleet, and left London to take up this position the following month. This is when he and Jackie Fisher finally cross paths. So, here is an example of what happens, and I just want to talk this through. Beresford comes up with a bright idea to practice manoeuvring and assembling a fleet. He takes a company of men ashore and uses them as stand-ins for the ships. Fisher noticed this display going on ashore and sends a signal demanding to know why Beresford had landed his men without permission. Now, you can both understand and sympathise with both sides on this one. Beresford wanted to practice and show how brilliant he was, and Fisher wanted to know why half a ship's company wasn't in the ship when the ship needed to be ready to go to sea the next day, and these ships were not exactly easy to get ready. Lord Charles resented this slight to his character. He also felt it was wrong that he was getting orders from his social climber who were from unknown origins. Fisher can be rightly considered to be slightly jealous of Beresford's inherited wealth and social position, all those things. But honestly, I can think Fisher himself was knocked off at the fact that if he'd done half the things that Beresford had, he wouldn't have gone anywhere in the Navy. He would have been chucked out. So I can sort of agree to an extent with Fisher, while with Lord Charles, I'm honestly still wondering how he's still in the Navy at this point. Anyway, in February 1902, he leaves the Mediterranean Fleet and returns to England. And he's elected to Parliament again, this time for Woolwich. You'll be glad to know, electors of Woolwich, he wasn't around for long. Then he goes off and visits New York City. In October 1902, he's promoted to a Vice Admiral. And in February 1903, he resigns from Parliament and is offered command of the Channel Fleet. In car, any significant crossover with Tyrion? No. No significant crossover with Tyrion. So I am noticing the chat is calming down. It might be because the chat is just sitting there going, and please tell me if this is true. Are there a lot of people watching this sitting there going, how is this guy in the Navy still? At what point did they give up with the idea of subtly getting rid of officers who were silly? I could also imagine, you have to remember with Fisher, is he's lost his brother, who was a very good naval officer, in a storm. And he's probably sitting there looking, when he's looking at officers and he's looking at them, he's probably comparing them mentally to his brother, who he didn't know that well, but he'd met a couple of times and, you know, he knew his brother's career and he knew what he'd been like. And he, of course, did get involved in leading the search for his brother and tried to save him. So he does seem to have had a deep amount of affection for his brother. And now he's got this officer being sent as his second in command, and he's just looking and going, how on earth are you in the Navy? Yes, we all would like to fall upwards as well as Beresford does. Anyway, so Beresford has his idea or his aims on being the first Sea Lord. That's what he's after. He thinks he deserves it. And when he gets command of the Channel Fleet in 1903, he hoists his flag aboard HMS Majestic. The pretty much, well, not brand new, but still very pretty looking pre-dreadnought. He's then knighted into both the Order of the Bath and the Royal Victorian Order. And then is given a... Well, he's then made... It's going to sound strange. He then gets promoted up those ranks. So he gets a GCVO in the 1906 and a GCB in 1911. Which is... what is it? GCVO is Knight Grand Cross of the Victorian Order. And then he's made it's a GCB, is a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath. If anyone feels like making me a GCB, I wouldn't mind. I object. Well, in 1911. So he gets promoted up those orders. Beresford was given command of the Mediterranean Fleet from 1905 till 1907. Here is something I find most interesting about the discussion point. David Beatty was serving as a captain under Beresford at this point. And he characterized Beresford's command as rigid training and discouragement of initiative. This is coming from Beatty. He's describing someone as doing rigid training and discouragement of initiative. Beresford was sure he was going to achieve the post of First Sea Lord in 1906 because mandatory retirement at 65, which was required, meant Fisher had to depart the Navy in 1906. However, Fisher was promoted to Admiral of the Fleet, which meant his retirement age extended to 70, which was problematic for Beresford because he would have to retire at 65 in 1911, unless he too got made to Admiral of the Fleet. But there is a small problem. And there is a very tiny issue. To become Admiral of the Fleet, pretty much unanimously, all the other admirals of the fleet, then still in existence, have to agree with you being promoted to it. If any of them don't want it, the Admiralty tends to not do it. And even then, even if they did all want it, you would have to have done something very special to be worthy of such a promotion, because becoming an Admiral of the Fleet is a big thing. Because even though you technically retire when you're 70, you actually never retire as Admiral of the Fleet. You are permanently on the books and permanently on call to be called up for your expertise. You are considered so good that it is considered that you should never be able to retire. And so, what do we think of Beresford's chance of getting there? Anyway. Daniel Politics. I joined an hour later, but I don't know why he's still in. Okay. Shamak. Did Beresford ever cross paths with King? I don't think so. I think he was still alive. I don't think King would have tolerated that. Jareth, personally liked signature signals of Beresford when the latter was returning to Anchorage after being out of maneuvers. I'm wondering why someone didn't tell Beresford to test the fuses on shells and allow his standard level of competence to solve the problem. That's possibly that. Fisher should have used this frigating shipping delusional man as target Brexit. There are certain issues which I would agree with on that one. Maybe Ron Catch maybe was very good there in Parliament. He was never in Parliament, so I don't think he was very good for that. Although that, depending on your particular minister, that could be prime minister, that could be considered a very attractive thing. ELB Sage, surely the Navy weren't so desperate for officers that the unit was actually needed. And no, I would argue they weren't. Serban Kurturfu, hello. In the words of von Hammerstein Irquote, one must beware of anyone who is both stupid and hardworking. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he'll always only cause damage. Yep. See, Richard's dog. I just think I'm joking with this. Mind you, you couldn't write this. No! If you turned this into a 5 or 6 part drama series, people would think you were making it up. No, they would think it was a comedy. No one would think you could do this and end up an admiral. Okay, now we know where BT got his falls from. No, compared to Beresford, here is the thing. If you ask me and Drakenfell and Jamie, and if you ask us all the 3 questions, if we had to pick whether we'd be serving under Beresford or BT, we'd honestly probably pick BT. Because at least you can just ignore his signals and he'll tolerate it as long as you win. Whereas Beresford, you can't even do that. It sounds like you're reading off Wikipedia. I'm reading off my notes, which I have to admit, and I will add, I have looked through some of the Wikipedia stuff because some of the fun stories they found on there. But what I found most interesting was that, as usual, most of the Wikipedia citations are to books which I already have, which was kind of useful because the books are fun. The one I particularly recommend is, if you want a good book, is Andrew Gordon's The Rules of the Game, Jutland and the British Naval Command. If you want a particularly good look at the admirals and their command roles, it was published in 1996, so it's a little old now. It's 26 years old, and there are certain people who would say we need to put out a new version, and honestly, I would love to work on that, and I might do something somewhere around that point. But the thing is, it's a very good book, and I think the reason there hasn't been much following up after it is because it's such a good book, it's basically waiting for enough time to pass to actually put a decent one together. Most of these stories come from that book, and most of them are, some of the others come from Geoffrey Bennett's book written in 1969, which is called Charlie B. And those two books are what I have used. I've got a digital copy of part of Charlie B. So someone sent me a good chunk of it. And I've got The Rules of the Game by Andrew Cohen, and I've used most of those. And if you go to Wikipedia, you will find those books are basically ones used for the Wikipedia article. So yes, similarities. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, BT's impression of Beresford. In So, here is the thing, and I would like to point this out. This is Beresford all over. He spent his whole career complaining and getting what he wants by complaining. So he decides the only chance for him getting to his post is if he makes Fisher resign or Maris is out Navy. So Beresford starts organising a campaign to criticise the handling of the Navy and its reforms. He transfers command to the Channel Fleet and takes that over 1917, 1909. Apparently a junior officer at the time, and I am, because no one produces a name for this, okay? There is this quote which comes out, which is quoted in Andrew Gordon's book, and I do find it interesting. And he is citing in this book, he's citing another author, another book, which I haven't got the original of, so I can't be sure. And honestly, when I first read it, when I was doing a quick scan of some documents, they all seem to come back to the same place. And so I went and read the book. And I read it, and I looked at it and went, there is no name. So it's kind of like today, when you have a no-name quote come out about someone, how much faith and trust do you put in it? So apparently a then junior officer described Beresford as having no superior as a seaman. This is a fleet which has Wilson in it, which has Jellicoe in it, which has Scott in it. Do you think any of them are going to describe this man as having no equal as a seaman, no superior as a seaman? No, it doesn't sound true. Basically, he seems to spend his time in charge doing going around the Channel Fleet, going around the ports of Britain, having crowded meetings in his honor, becoming freeman of cities and receiving deputations. But the fleet doesn't do any exercises. It doesn't either attempt or solve any war problems. It doesn't really do anything. However, one thing he does seem to do is he arguably is involved in the selecting Grimsby trawlers for minesweeping operations after he visits the various the East Coast ports in 1907 while part of this fleet, while in charge of the Channel Fleet. And these, of course, would go into form the Royal Navy Patrol Service, which would be so critical in the First World War. Now, here is another thing where this is the point where I get into trouble with other historians, because if you go to especially Gordon's work, and that is Andrew Gordon's The Rules of the Game, Andrew makes a persuasive case, I would argue, that Beresford has a change of personality and gets progressively worse after possibly suffering a stroke in sometime before 1907. I don't think so. You see, I don't think he's been a nice character at any point in his life. And I see these things turning up. Yes, it might be worse as he's an old man, as he got older, but it's been there pretty much his whole life. He's been unthinking, selfish, and self-centered by the looks of things. That, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, of course, but yeah, I think that gives them too much of an easy out. What's really interesting is there are incidents involving Percy Scott, who is the commander of 1st Cruiser Squadron in the Channel Fleet, or 1st Cruiser Division, at that time, between 1907 and 1908. So, in November 1907, Beresford orders the Channel Fleet to return to harbour and be repainted for review by the Kaiser, because the Kaiser's coming to visit. Roxburgh, an armoured cruiser which reported to Scott, was engaged in gunnery practice at Portland at a point, and the captain requested permission to finish the exercise before returning to harbour. Scott replied with a signal, "Paintwork appears to be more in demand than gunnery, so you'd better come in time to make yourself look pretty by the 8th. Which is not exactly polite, but, Anyway. 4 days later, a staff officer is visiting Scott's flagship, hears the signal, and reports it to Beresford, who then summons and reprimands Scott in a very one-sided interview. There are various reports as to whether or not he allowed Scott to actually defend himself or explain himself. But what we do know is that he then asked the Admiralty to relieve Scott of his command, writing that Scott's signal was totally opposed to loyalty and discipline, contemptuous in tone, insubordinate character, and wanting in dignity. Okay, let's be honest. Let's put this one side. This is the man who literally writes letters to Elm and Sundry complaining about ships he's on so he can get moved to ships, is now doing an actual letter campaign against Fisher to try and get Fisher to resign so he can become First Sea Lord, and he doesn't like a slightly sarcastic message? It's the game you play, mate. I'm sorry. I've just got on to the point of CB getting offered the channel command. Zachary Coogan, I mean, you've got to be impressed that he made BT of all people say that. Yeah. Jeff, upon coming on station, Fisher signals good. Thereafter, Beresford overshoots, to which Fisher adds the signal to my last god. Oh, good lord. The Colonel, have you read the Buller novels? A long time ago. So, give Beresford command of the battlecruisers. What happens? No, do not give him command of the battlecruisers. Actually, Beresford did speak in Parliament, mostly using the time to attack naval rivals. Yes, that was pretty much it. Rankash, the rule of the game is one of the most in-depth books I've ever read and recommended to me by an ex-second Sea Lord. Yes, it is. It's very good. Then Freeman, I'm still playing catch up, but I've just got up to the Housian Navy thing. I'm thinking that everyone is hoping the next captain will manage to have an accent. Oh, back. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Georgian, don't see. Some people can dish it out, but they can't take it. Yeah. Hello, Nook. Sorry about what? Yeah. That this is not his only run-in with Percy Scott. There are several other points as well. Scott also gets into trouble. He gets getting fired because basically we brought up Trion incident, where of course the Admiral famously issued orders and expected his ships to do their job and think for themselves, but they didn't. They ended up colliding. Well, Beresford issued an order in 1908, and Scott disobeyed the order as it would have resulted in a collision. And Beresford tried to put him on a court-martial for it. And basically, Beresford was laughed at by most of the Navy. At that point, George Newman, why was Beresford given command of anything other than a mess kit repair facility? I have no idea. The US Congress would love this guy. The US Congress would have made this guy their head admiral. Anyway, in 1909, Beresford loses command of the Channel Fleet and returns to Parliament in the January 1910 general election, representing Portsmouth. Oh, the Admiralty is so happy. In April 1909, he wrote a letter to Asquith, their then Prime Minister, and threatened to express his concerns and discontent with Admiralty policy in public if they didn't get rid of Fisher and reverse the reforms immediately. He wanted to get rid of the Fisher-Selborne reforms. He didn't like dreadnought battleships. He didn't like battle cruisers. He didn't like the scenario with all the ships being got rid of around the world, and all the old ships being got rid of, because he felt it. Beresford very much feels it doesn't matter what you have, as long as you have on the numbers list 200 battleships. That will make people afraid. It doesn't matter that anyone who's actually halfway decent knows what they're looking at and goes, yeah, but about 190 of those battleships don't count because anything can wipe them out. We can probably knock them over with a sloop. No. What matters is you have 200 battleships on the books. I know I'm somewhat in between the position because I think you should have the ships out around the world, but I think that what the Royal Navy should have been doing was investing in cruisers along with capital ships to do it. And the trouble is they weren't given the funding to do both, and they had to pick one, so they one or the other, so they picked the capital ships. That makes sense, but you know. Anyway, so Asquith sets up a committee for imperial defence on the matter. He does. It's a wonderful one. And they report on it. They uphold the Admiralty policy. But he's finally got what he wanted. And Fisher is forced to retire early in 1910 in anticipation of the general election. However, Beresford doesn't get First Sea Lord. Oh, no. In fact, What happens is, well, it's rather poetic. There are different experiences of what Beresford does when he realizes he hasn't made First Sea Lord. But, and I say this politely, he is rather unhappy with it. So, if I get my little notes up here. Now, as you all know, after Fisher, that wonderful Fisher, or rather interesting gentleman, the first Sea Lord is a gentleman called Arthur Wilson, who Beresford also hated. And I would argue Arthur Wilson is possibly, of the Troika, the only one of the out of the three who I actually really quite like. If I had to pick one of the three to actually hang out with, it would be Wilson. He had basically spent his career coming up behind Beresford and trying to fix whatever Beresford had left behind as an admiral. Now, I have to admit, as First Sea Lord, he's described often as being abrasive, inarticulate, and autocratic, but I actually think that's wrong, especially the inarticulate one. The abrasive and autocratic, I'm not sure about the autocratic and the abrasive. He's an admiral in the 1900s. They're not usually known for being democratic, collegiate leaders. They are known for making decisions. But he does actually make decisions, and he doesn't punish people when they have a good reason for for doing things differently. So that means he's better in my mind. And as for inarticulate, he's not. He is actually a very persuasive naval speaker in many respects. In the great Wilson versus Wilson debate for the Army versus the Navy, in terms of strategy, he wins with the committee. And the thing is, the politicians don't want to say he's won because that will cause a war with the army, i.e. a political war. And we've just seen what this guy can do in a political war because of his connections. The army has dozens of him. For some reason, the governments don't want to take on the army, so they leave it be. And that is what leads to the strategic muddle of World War One. Anyway, so he doesn't get to be an admiral of the fleet, and he doesn't get to be First Sea Lord. Wilson's in the role. And the other advantage of Wilson is he's going to maintain Fisher's reforms. This causes Beresford to go apoplectic. There are rumours he had already, the moment he got heard Fisher was going, and remember, he would have had about a year in post. He was already working on contacting friends, working out who he should appoint to his staff, all sorts of things. And of course, Wilson gets into the job, not him. Anyway. I wouldn't call Wilson Fisher's protege. Wilson is, to an extent, Fisher's friend. He's trusted by Fisher. Fisher and Wilson get along. They both have similar standards of quality. Anyway, in 1912, George V, who by this point is king, and who thinks Beresford is wonderful, I'm not sure, tries to suggest that Beresford should be promoted to Admiral of the Fleet. Okay, here comes Beatty again. Who is Naval Secretary by this point to Winston Churchill, who has to go and point out to the king that others would be more deserving of such promotion. So he gets what is in the King's grant. In 1914, Beresford is made an honorary colonel of the Royal Marines. I'm not sure what the Royal Marines did to deserve this form of punishment. Perhaps some of them didn't salute George V fast enough. I'm not sure what, but apparently that's what you get. You can't get Admiral of the Fleet, so become honorary colonel of the Royal Marines. Now, is he completely without merit? No. In fact, there is one thing here where Fisher's in the wrong and Beresford's actually in the right. Beresford wanted to reform the Fleet Signal Book. He wanted to make it better and more efficient. He actually did champion reforms for fire control. And he did want better long-range fire control on ships. Although he didn't like Percy Scott's methodologies, he supported pretty much anyone other than Scott because he hated Scott. So he does actually have some good things, but technologically, really, well, Wikipedia puts it as somewhat left behind. The other historians, whoever wrote on Wikipedia is a far nicer soul than I am. Some historians have wrote that he didn't keep pace with technology. I would point out he only ever attends the gunnery school, HMS Excellent, and he manages to break his foot while he's there. And after that, his technical schooling is really over. And he doesn't seem to be that hot of a navigator. So I would say he is one of the last admirals to come from a patch of the Navy which just doesn't believe you need to know anything other than you needed to know when the Royal Navy was in the age of sail. And honestly, in the age of sail, he'd have probably fit right in because he actually liked sailing ships. Anyway. So, Arthur Wilson was then replaced by Francis Bridgeman. And Bridgeman proved to be sort of unsatisfactory as first Sea Lord. Let's put it this way. Arthur Wilson, this is the first Sealers of the Royal Navy from Jackie Fisher onwards, okay? Actually, no, we'll do it from before that. So, in 1893 to 1899, it had been Admiral Fleet Sir Frederick Richards, who had been in post for 5 years, 291 days. Then, from 1899 to 1904, it's Admiral of the Fleet Lord Walter Keir, who is in the post for 5 years and 63 days. In 1904 to 1910 is John Fisher, Jackie Fisher, who's in post for 5 years and 96 days. So actually, serving 5 years plus is the standard for a first Sea Lord by this point. So why... I don't know why Beresford convinced himself that Fisher wouldn't do 5 years. I have no idea, because literally the two previous admiral ones had both done 5 years and been promoted admirals of the fleet. Then Sir Arthur Wilson comes along. He does a year and 314 days. Then there's Francis Bridgeman, who does a year and 4 days. And then Louis Battenberg comes along, and he does a year and 325 days. And Fisher does 197 days. Henry Jackson does 1 year and 199 days. John Jellicoe does a year and 41 days. Rosalind Weymouth does a year and 295 days. And finally, we get a correction when Beatty does 7 years and 271 days. Okay. Here is the point. having your first Sea Lord, etc., and secondly Sea Lord do about 5 years each in the post and swap over halfway in between is actually fairly good for political continuity and command and control of the fleet. I would argue that more than just World War One, it is the work of this man in trying to attack this man and the war that comes between them, and the feuds in the Navy as a result of them, especially of his political campaigning, because he wants something, he believes he's got a divine right to the post this gentleman's in just because of his background, that leads to the Royal Navy having the instability it has during World War One and the run up to World War One. If you think about it, if the Royal Navy had, well, if you combine Arthur Wilson, Wilson's, Bridgman's, and Battenberg's times in post, you end up with roughly 5 years. So theoretically, there should have been a First Lord of the Admiralty in post for 5 years, which would have given the Royal Navy stability approaching First World War. Instead, they have Wilson, then Bridgman, then Battenberg. And Battenberg is actually good at his job to an extent. He's not as good as Fisher would have been, but there again, he's not been in post as long as Fisher has been. And there are very few people who were as smart as fast as Fisher is. Beresford, when Bridgman resigns, Beresford actually decides to attack Churchill over it, challenging Churchill in the House of Commons to prove that basically Bridgman had retired due to ill health and been put in post by replaced in post by Battenberg. Now, Churchill's response was that within a fortnight, and this was in reference to when he became First Lord of the Admiralty, within a fortnight, he made a speech in which he said, "I had betrayed the Navy. And ever since, he's been going by the country, pouring out charges of espionage, favouritism, blackmail, fraud, and inefficiency. The noble lord nourishes many bitter animosities on naval matters." It's getting a bit absurd. Basically, everyone you realise Beresford was attacking Churchill because it was a continuation of his dispute with Fisher, because Fisher was basically the unofficial advisor of Churchill. But it was also due to Beresford stirring up anti-German sentiment amongst the British public, and especially in the gentlemen's clubs. That's where the elite and the gentry gathered in London, which he basically toured, attacking Louis of Battenberg, Battenberg, which meant that Churchill's almost forced to ask Louis to resign in 1914, and Louis has to because of this campaign to discredit him put in place by Beresford. Here's the thing. Beresford actually thinks that if he does this, he's going to be made First Sea Lord. And of course, what actually happens? Fisher's called back. Can we just imagine Beresford's reaction to Fisher being called back to the Admiralty because of the campaign he's put in to try and get rid of someone? Anyone want to bet the guy was screaming loudly around the place? I mean, running, shouting, generally gesticulating, possibly frothing at the mouth. It's just, yeah. Anyway, I will get into questions now. I'll just... let's see. Dan Freeman, just think that this guy could have been one of the senior leaders in the RN if they'd gone to war after the Russians attacked the fishing fleet en route to Tsushima. He could have been. At that point, he would have been in charge of the Mediterranean fleet, I think it was. Let's see. Yeah, he's in the Mediterranean fleet. So, yes, he would have been ordered into the Black Sea. he'd have had to go through the Dardanelles to attack Crimea. That would have been interesting. Then who would win, Beresford or Kamchatka? Don't ask that question. That's just a terrible, cruel question to ask. I honestly can't decide that one. I would need a lot more data, and it's not data I want to gather. Schumacher, for the icing on top, did Beresford call Jellicoe incompetent or hold up his career in some way? He tried to hold up a lot of people's careers. I'm not getting into this one, but there is a line I never thought I'd hear anyone write in the chat. Georgian, did examinations under the RMs go up off that? No. Mostly just pretended they didn't have an honorary colonel, I think. Bushram, did Beresford handle HMS Condor at the bombardment of Alexandria? Yes. It seems to win him some fame. He kept a gunboat close to the fort where they couldn't hit Condor, but Condor could hit them, silencing them. Yes, he did do that well, and that did get him fame, but it was also his assigned post by the Admiral, and honestly, he just had to get into position, then his gunnery officer took over. Schumacher, there are these things, these are things that Fisher probably would have supported if Beresford wasn't busy trying to tear down everything Fisher built. Pretty much. Senator, 5 years in office. Sounds like a job for CB. Nice hearing. Jellicoe got the last and largest battle cruiser, the largest ship in the world, for 20 years. But Jackson was right about the arms race that the UK and USA could afford. That's what I can't think of a better friggin' you to Beresford than anything Fisher. I do think, honestly, it would have probably been someone else if Beresford hadn't been annoying Churchill quite so much. In fact, honestly, it's one of those things. Beatty, as First Lord of the Admiralty, makes some absolutely whoppers of mistakes, but still does a better job than Beresford probably would have done in post. Because Beresford is just... Beresford has a lot of political influence, but Beresford is... I have no idea where his vision on Navy is. I have no idea what his vision of Navy is. All the reading I've done... one of the books I've been really sort of trying to work into this, and I have to admit I've got it still out because I've been trying to work it in the entire time, was I thought, well, this has got to be the new one that's going to cover this. And I opened it up. And I went to the index, and I went, okay, so right now I'm looking for Beresford. Now, this is what you normally do as a historian when you're looking for information about people. You go through books on period, and you look for the title of them. And Andrew Lambert is a very good historian. And I was going, right then, Beresford. Well, there's Battenberg here, and Beaumont, and Belarus. And, oh, finally, Beresford. Okay, what's he going to write about him? Because I sort of remembered, but I wanted to go check it. It's on page 4, apparently, something that would be written about Beresford, but honestly... no. There wasn't much there. In fact, it seemed rather dismissive to an extent of Beresford. Okay. So then we go to page 105, which is the next one. And I really wanted to include some quotes because there's no quotes pretty much anywhere from this book and on this, and it's a new book. And I was really hoping to include the quotes. So I went to 105. In 1905, the war course left Greenwich, and by January 1906, Corbett was lecturing at Devonport. We are much better installed than at Greenwich, with every modern convenience. Round me is raging a most interesting war game to test what we could do in case of having to take up arms with France. But this is in confidence. We are fast becoming something like a general staff. This was no accident. While Fisher opposed the creation of a formal naval staff, which might restrict his freedom of action or expose his ideas to critics, he needed a quasi-official body to address the strategic problems created by the shift of focus to face Germany in the North Sea, the Army General Staff's rejection of maritime strategy, and the insubordinate nonsense of Admiral Sir Charles Beresford. Okay, that seems strange. You're actually having an entire team being formed to deal with Beresford being an idiot, Beresford being annoying. Okay, page 120. What's written about him there? And I'm only doing a couple of quotes from this book, but that's the point. I haven't used the quotes from this book because mostly they are very good, very on the point, and very Andrew style. And then I was looking through this book, this quote, and I was just sort of going, well, where is Beresford, I suppose? Okay, here it is again. Let's see. Taken together, they provide the intellectual core of a British way that shaped British naval education policy and strategy between 1902 and 1922. Corbett's analysis of British strategy reflects his engagement with a range of remarkable men: Custis and Clarke, Fisher, Prince Louis, Jackson, Slade, Ballard, and even Lewis Bailey, who deepened his understanding and constantly changing audience that demanded attention. Corbett's elegant, incisive approach and quasi-religious commitment to the service ensured the results exceeded expectation. The issues were immediate, political, and pressing. Beresford's bluster and the Army's continual obsessions threatened his liberal progressive worldview of a protectionist empire and a continental army. He responded with elegant essays and sophisticated histories and engaging lectures that sustained the British way while peace lasted. You start to realise that the more you go through this book, the more the trouble that Beresford caused seems to crop up. Beresford is not articulating from a point of knowledge or understanding or even really disagreement. He's articulating from a point of, it's not me. And that's rather problematic to deal with. You can deal with a lot of things as an admiral. You can deal with a lot of things as a navy. But when one of your most senior and most connected officers is opposing everything you're doing from the point of view of, it's not me doing it, what do you do? How do you manage it? And the trouble is, to an extent, the Navy had created Beresford. The Navy had allowed him to get ahead. Navy had, when all those things had happened, they hadn't got rid of him. Dirt Squad, the same Darnell's and Bosphorus that I considered a tricky transit with today's accuracy maneuver. Yeah. A nice thing, why did Beresford not think the Admiral-class battlecruisers were needed when 3 battlecruisers were blown to bits and they were still viable? Beresford just didn't like anything, any of the designs. He didn't think... How do I put this politely? Okay. As I understand it, and this is from talking with a friend who's done far more research and he's wanting to produce a book at some point on some of the admirals in the First World War period. So they're who I contacted about this. And when the book comes out, I will no doubt review it, and I'm sure it's going to be excellent. I've seen some bits of it, but I'm not allowed to say them or who it is at the moment. Because they haven't got a firm publishing contract yet. They should have one, because it's a very good book, but they haven't. From what I understand from this friend, on his objections to the battle cruise, etc., is he calls them Fisher's Follies. It's not so much he's articulating a case for dreadnought battleships. He's almost articulating a case for a pre-dreadnought dreadnought. He feels that the gun that you shouldn't have dual-purpose guns. To be honest, I think Beresford would have been happy with a ship like the Bismarck or the Tirpitz, where it's got specialist guns for every single role. Just no. Senator, what would a First Sea Lord do in 5 years in office? Probably spend most of his time trying to beat up anyone who disagreed with him politically. Garman, hello, I've been baffled, confused, and amused today. It's been a long day. Please tell me tonight's is simple. No. Dan, Senator, you know the ABC quote about taking 300 years to build a tradition? Beresford would have probably managed to wreck that. Beresford would have been all about traditions, as long as those traditions enhanced him. That's good. Beresford has a lot of political influence, but how much political capital would he have to spend to become First Sea Lord? By the time he got to First SL, would he be able to do much? That's the thing. He expends all this political capital to try and become First Sea Lord. He unseats Fisher, but he doesn't get to be First Sea Lord. So, no. Jessica Lou, I do not care about the Royal Navy. I listen only to hear Dr. Clarke getting sarcastic. Yeah, well, there's a lot of sarcasm tonight. Danrin, I think the Beresford will be a utility boat that vacuums all the waste from NORSBM. Nah. Good, we wouldn't want the waste boat could get navigational issues. I say, when 1/5 of your battlecruiser fleet has been sunk, you need to replace them. I think it's more than 1/5 of the battlecruiser fleet, but yeah. That's good. Beresford arguing for pre-dreads in 1906 is a good sign. He's no longer arguing for ships of the line. He is arguing for pre-dreads. He is really trying to push the pre-dreads in 1906 and 1907. He doesn't like dreadnought battle. Basically, his point of opposition is if it's not his idea, not him doing it, it shouldn't be done. I think, Jen, if you said the problem with the political class of that period was they could not tell Beresford you aren't good enough, mate, which was a product of Victorian attitudes, I'm fairly certain, actually, my view is they couldn't tell him that because he was one of them. And their own personal view was that because he came from them, he must be good at his job. Because they're good at their job, surely. Because they're the Victorian upper class. And there is a strong vein which goes through that. Plus, as I said, he gets the support of King George. He gets the support of Edward VII when he's Prince of Wales until that incident with the affair. And then somehow he manages to glob onto George V. I don't really know how, but he gets George V becomes totally enamored with him. possibly because George V's wife and Edward VII's wife both preferred to dance with Fisher than their husbands or with Beresford. Vision. Beresford sounds like one of the small ship champions of the US Navy. Thinking that got the USN Mississippi and Idaho, sold the agree. Even after World War I, the USN did a small battleship study. Yeah, they did all sorts of things. I think Dan Freeman, the trouble is, it's kind of like, and I was recording the episode today on the Duke of Edinburgh class, re-recording a section of it. Re-recording a lot of it, actually. I'm going to use, I'm not sure how I'm going to splice it together. I've got 3 different recordings. I'm not sure how it's going to go in the end. But what I do know, and what came out of it, was that the armoured cruisers get a reputation for Jutland of being bad ships. They're not bad ships. They've got an admiral who, frankly, shouldn't be in charge of them. And if we look at the battle cruisers at Jutland, well, you can either they're not being used, they should be. At no point, there is no need. The Grand Fleet do not need the support of the battle cruisers in line versus the High Seas Fleet. The High Seas Fleet needs the support of their battle cruisers in line against the Royal Navy's the Grand Fleet, because the Grand Fleet has so many dreadnoughts that to try and spread out the fire, they probably need the support of their first scouting group. But the battle cruisers of the Grand Fleet and the battle cruiser fleet should go off and come round and attack from a different angle. They should not be trying to get into the mix with the Grand Fleet fighting the High Seas Fleet. They're not needed. And that's not their role. That's not what they're designed for. This is the trouble. When you use ships for what they're supposed to do, they do very well. When you use ships for something they're not designed for, not built for, and not really spaced around, you tend to have problems, and that's what happens. That's good. Being a drinking buddy of the king has its advantages, I guess. Yeah. On camera, why do I get the feeling that if he had been ordered to attack the Russian Second Pacific ships passing through Med, he would have had his ships around them, and that's how the Greeks fought in the Med? I don't think he'd have gone that far, but honestly, I have no idea what he would have done. I would feel very sorry for his second in command at that point, because I have a feeling he might have to start issuing orders. Goodness knows what Fisher would have done. Fisher might well have had to have him replaced. Fisher might have had to come with an idea of moving him or something. Oh, Fisher could have appointed him to the China station to go out and take emergency command to assist with the Japanese. In Cal, was King George V in the habit of trying to interfere in naval matters? He learnt very quickly not to interfere in naval matters. That's good. Should Jellicoe and Beatty have been swapped? I feel Beatty would have been okay with a line of battleships based upon Scapa. No need to think too far outside of the box. Honestly, he wasn't that good at that one either. Hello! Okay. I'm just going with Stridey. I'm sorry. I would love to try and pronounce your name, but I think I get it wrong sometimes. But there is no way to make sure a ship is used for what it's built for, ever. It will always go that way. And so, what then? That is the true. That is certainly the case. There is no way to make sure a ship is always used what it's supposed to be used for. But honestly, if we again go to the battle cruisers and the armor cruisers at Jutland, they are able to be. The ships which are used for what they're supposed to be used for do very well. And in the case of the armored cruisers, well, the signal they're supposed to change positions on the line because of where the fleet's going. You have a choice. You either pass down the unengaged side of the battle fleet, or you pass down the engaged side of the battle fleet. A buff-knot passes down the engaged side of the battle fleet, and surprise, surprise, gets ship sunk, and obscures the guns of the battle fleet and from being able to fire at the Germans. So the Germans can't fire at the battle fleet because they can't see you through a smoke. The ground fleet can't fire at the Germans because they can't see you through a buff-knot smoke. All the Germans can see is a buff-knot cruisers, and so boom, 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 bye-bye cruisers. Well, that's not the cruiser's fault. And that's not even the fleet using. That's an admiral being, I'm not sure what. Oh, well, VCH, I'm going to be getting back to you on the book because you've sent me some details and stuff on the book, and I'm getting through to getting back to you on that. And I'm just managing to get caught up with stuff. I've been having a bit of a weird week. But congratulations on meeting with Jay Leno. Enjoy. And, well, say hello to him for me because, yeah, he's cool. I tell you, 4 G3s, 4 admirals, and 2 renowns would probably have been enough to update the battlecruiser fleet. It would have been enough to do something. Jeff, whose wing of the RN did our buff not come from? Fisher or Beresford's? It's an interesting decision. He actually comes sort of sent from Fisher's side, and he is supported into his post by Jellicoe. But yeah, he also seems to have good friendships with people from the other side as well. So he's a bit of an interesting one. A buff not. I now have visions of Beresford offending someone while out in the China stations assisting the Japanese and accidentally getting disemboweled in their head. We hope not that. That's a bit graphic. Dan, you're a doctor. That's a bit graphic. Come on, a good captain and admiral know the limitations of their ships like a soldier's their weapon. Yep. Sorry, it's Strider Held Strider. Thought I was creative years ago. It is a good one. It's just trying to read it on the screen and pronounce it. So I'm just going with Strider. Okay. Sorry. That's good. Someone should have sent Beresford to somewhere he couldn't have caught. Could have caught. Yeah. Anyway, so was Beresford Fisher's foil? This is the ultimate thing. What were they doing? What was their their sort of scenario like? Honestly, Beresford isn't Fisher's foil. He is the main sparring partner by the end. And sometimes they do actually agree and work together, strangely enough. But that's very rare and in between. And it's mostly when Beresford does that, it's a shock to everyone he does. Beresford really loves this painting on this side by Charles Wellington Fures. And it's, you know, he feels this is him. This is what he is. And that painting in many ways sums up Beresford to me. Because the image is just so. Everything's gallantry put together. Everything is style. Everything is presentation. Everything is perception of him as this great noble warrior. And yet, these pictures sum up the differences between the two men. It's going to sound strange, but there's always something in that picture which strikes me as Fisher looks just that little unsure of himself. Yes, strong. Yes, decisive. You can see that in all of the ways posture and his thing, everything, but there is just something of an air of he's not 100% sure of himself. He's ready to question himself if he needs to. In contrast to Beresford's, there's nothing, and there's no questions there. He knows he's got all the answers in his mind. Look at him, he's got the elegant and very much aristocratic tie and shirt and design, and everything's, just so. Whereas, to be honest, Fisher hasn't gone with that kind of setup. Ultimately, when I look at those two, I see a battle for the soul of the Royal Navy. And neither one was an entirely virtuous soul. Neither one was the entirely without sin or entirely good for the Navy. But one was certainly better for the Navy than the other. One represented change. Sometimes it feels like change for change's sake, but often necessary. One he doesn't even represent tradition. It's almost like he believes he deserves these things he's given. He doesn't. He doesn't consider it a great honor, or that he's been bestowed with a great responsibility. He feels he should be First Sea Lord because he is a lord. I honestly think when he's midshipman, he wouldn't. Then they decide that they're going to deal with his problem with gambling and etc. by transferring him to another ship and making him senior midshipman and giving greater responsibility. That just confirms to him that he can do no wrong, as he is going to get promoted up because of who he is. He is innately right to command. And he is fine to an extent when he's commanded by other lords. When he feels that they have the noblesse oblige, they have the status to command him, he's fine with them. He's brilliant at simpering up to people who have superior titles. But he isn't good at dealing with captains who are there because of experience rather than title and privilege. He isn't good at dealing with officers who are there because of their knowledge. He isn't good at running a modern navy. In fact, he wouldn't have been good. Imagine, this is the thing. Imagine if he turned round to St. Vincent or Collingwood or Nelson or Duncan or any of those officers and said, you shouldn't be in charge of me because you don't come from a noble enough family. St. Vincent would have, well, let's be honest, St. Vincent would have been gone full something on him. In an earlier age, he might well have found himself at various points in his career strung up or keel-hauled. But because of his connections, because of his social standing, because of the way his family worked it, and remember, they're not just a noble family, they're a noble church family, so they have a lot of connections. The church always has a lot of power in this period. And a political connections. He just keeps, someone wrote in the thing, failing upwards. Yeah, that's it. He fails upwards the entire time. Douglas, can you give an example of point of agreement and preferably cooperation results between Fisher and Beresford? They actually agreed at certain points to do with seaman pay and some issues when it came to reform of communication systems. They did actually get involved at some point, but then Beresford tried to attack Fisher using it by saying, "Look, I'm having to do this for Fisher because Fisher can't do it," and turned into a bloodbath. Abazuski, and in the background of the painting there is ship line rigging. It's very much an older style ship. I think the Saturday long patrol tonight will be interesting. It is going to be interesting. Scott, am I right in thinking Beresford supported Fisher in the reform of RN officer training? To an extent, but he also didn't like some of the reforms and then started attacking them at other points when he felt it was politically useful to do so. Strider. No, sorry. For some reason, everyone reads it as Stridey. Sturdy. I like that. Hi, Dick. Hi, Dick. Richard Richards. Paul, sorry, is Beresford the final episode in an attempt to gentrify the Royal Navy? He is the product of the gentrification of the Royal Navy, certainly. Scott, I wonder if it would have helped him to be allowed to gamble with ratings. Probably thinking he could clean them out and have them deal with his inability to settle his debt. Oh no, his father paid off his debts. This is Fisher. This is Beresford. Richard, how often was keel hauling done? More often than we like to think, but less often than the movies suggest. Seneca, to quote, he has no equal as a seaman. That was a misquote. The real quote was he is not equal to a seaman. That could well be more true. Okay, he opposed the super dreadnoughts, didn't he? You could name any ship that this guy would oppose it. Pretty much. In his view, the Royal Navy shouldn't advance the technology or the naval or the warship design. They should only outbuild everyone for it. They should let others bear the cost of advancement. Lol, my parents weren't quite that cruel. Close though. Now, turn. Why didn't Beresford not see that the pre-dreadnoughts were obsolete? Because Fisher was building the dreadnoughts. Come, off topic, but light-hearted. As you're wearing a Scooby-Doo shirt, what ship would be the Mystery Machine? Ah. What's the ship version of a VW camper? A landing ship tank? In car, Beresford's views on submarines. There's actually a quote somewhere. Let me find it. I had it on. Oh. What's it called? Hansard. Right then. He actually makes a quote, a speech on. I don't want it in 1914. I want the 1912 one. Lord Charles Beresford, 1912. Now, there is. This is the thing, this is some of the redeeming qualities of Beresford. In 1912, December 21st, he asked the First Lord of the Admiralty how many of the petty officers and men who lost their lives in the accident to the submarine A3 were married, whether any of the married men had children, and whether any of the single men had fathers or mothers dependent upon them for their support, and what rates of compensation, compassionate allowance will be paid to the widows, children, and parents. Parliamentary Secretary to the Board of the Admiralty, Dr. McNamara, responded with this. So far as is known, 6 of the men have left widows and 4 of them have left children. 2 of the widows have been granted pensions of 5 shillings a week and allowances of 1 shilling 6pence each for their children. 2 have been granted pensions of 9 shillings a week and allowances of 2 shillings a week for their children. 1 has been granted a pension of 5 shillings a week, and the case of the 6th is under investigation. The circumstances of relatives, other than widows of 2 men, are being investigated with view to grant of gratuities if they are found to have been dependent. In the case of the remaining 2 men, it's not known whether they have left widows or other relatives who would be eligible for pensions or gratuities. Beresford asked, will the right honourable gentleman inquire and let me know privately later as to the remaining men? Yes. Beresford actually got involved in several incidents to do with the loss of people's lives and did actually seem to care about that. This is one of the things which does actually unite him and Fisher, and that they care about the men who are the sailors who are on their charge. He. But he does ask some fairly decent questions. It's one of the interesting things is when you go through Hansard and you see his comments and speeches, he makes in the Navy Estimates debate of 1912, and that's the March 18th, 1912, Beresford makes 17 entries. And he writes this sort of thing. Then I misunderstood that the right honourable gentleman once said to me. He told me he was strongly in favour of 2 kills to 1. That was a private conversation, and I ought not to have mentioned it. I am very sorry. I am rather of the idea, however, that my right honourable friend said so in public. I objected to 2 kills to 1 for that reason. They wanted to lay down 11 dreadnoughts in 1910 to 11, 11 dreadnoughts in 1911 to 12. That is what they thought would have had us do to get the 2 kills to 1 by that period. That was absolutely impossible. As I pointed out at the time, it could not be done. It would have cost 20 million more than the suggestion of the shipbuilding vote made to the London Chamber of Commerce in 1909 for one class of ship alone, without any cruisers, men, coal, torpedo boats, destroyers, or anything else necessary to make these ships effective. That program laid before the London Chamber of Commerce had been carried out. We should have none of this. We should have had none of this competition. We should have had a Navy vote suitable in all details, should of which not very many have been carried out since. Although necessity was denied at the time, we should have had our slips clear and the manufacturers and all industries ready, provided we wanted a Navy program, which I pointed out might be necessary in 1912-13. We should have stopped the competition. This irritation would not have been here, and we should have been in a prompt position with regard to defence, without the irritation and competition going on at this moment. We are always niggling at Germany. Instead of going ahead and looking after our imperial defence, we are making all this disagreeableness. It could have been avoided if we had gone at a time when money was cheap and trade booming. Now this irritation will go on, holding to this crabbing policy year after year, just as we've been done for the last 5 or 6 years, instead of putting down a big defence bill and showing Germany it was absolutely impossible for her to go on. I am sure the right honourable gentleman is laughing now, thinking he has shown Germany that I will show how utterly wrong that is. Churchill's response was, please do not attribute that sentiment to me. It will do more harm than the noble lord thinks. Lord Charles Beresford, I am merely saying the right honourable gentleman has told Germany distinctly that he will lay down 2 keels to everyone she does. Does he object to that? It will be read so in Germany and in this country tomorrow. Whatever Germany lays down from now on the right honourable gentleman, as I understand it, said he would lay down double. If I am wrong, perhaps the right honourable gentleman will contradict me. This is what I understand him to say, and what I object to. I say that there is a distinct threat made to Germany in this House, and that is not the way to promote peace and curtail armaments. The right honourable gentleman would base his shipbuilding vote and construction vote on what is necessary for us, and left Germany alone, it would be a great deal better. On what is the German government policy on construction based? It has been based entirely on the German naval law. The German Navy law was laid down in 1900 for the whole world to see. We, on this side of the House, at any rate, had an imperial policy. Very conservative-minded at this point, in conservative versus liberals. We did not pick out Germany, but the party opposite did pick out Germany. And having picked out Germany and knowing the German Navy law 1900 perfectly well, first thing they did was reduce in 1906-7 the armoured ships from 4 to 3. That was the year I pointed out that Germany increased their armament by 6 after our reduction. In 1907-8, the government reduced them from 4 to 3 again. In the year 1908-9, they reduced them to 2. But in 1909-10, they laid down 8 ships. If their construction was based on what Germany did, why did they not? Would they lay down 2 one year and 8 the other? Now I come to the point where I take issue with the front bench. The government held up Germany as a bugbear, and the Right Honourable General, Mr. Lee, laughs when I say it was our fault, saying that she did something she did not do. They were taken to task for that by the Honourable General opposite. Germany had not then touched her Navy law as far as additions were concerned. That is the way the great irritation began in that country. I know a great many distinguished Germans, and that is what they have told me. I believe them, and I've seen it in the German press. What was the real reason? Public got anxious in this country. The opposition called attention to the weakness that would accrue in 2 or 3 years, and they began singing, "We will have 8, and we won't wait." The government saw that they had an affected false economy. What did they do? So within recollection of the House. I was at sea at the time, and I got it by wireless. I thought there would be war in a week. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, and the First Lord of the Admiralty came down on that bench and made scare and panic speeches. It is no use to the Right Honourable Gentleman shaking his head. I thought we were going to war in a week, for they could not have made speeches of strong character. It's all based on what was going to happen in Germany. I maintain that Germany had not made any alteration whatever, and what happened was that the front bench suddenly made a discovery in connection with the commentary works. He is an interesting admiral. He also heckles the whole way through the speech, in Churchill's speech. In fact, he shouts out quite interesting things. I do agree with one thing. He does try. There is one interesting thing considering my current discussion and current ongoing videos, which proving very popular people who actually watch them on Mondays on the shipyards. And Churchill says this line, I have dealt with the programme of the year, and before I do come to the important question connected with the establishment, which we should maintain, there are 4 topics connected with shipbuilding to which I must refer. Docks, oil, aviation, and shipbuilding capacity. The docking accommodation available for fleet action perspective is not at all unsatisfactory. Indeed, I may say I was very agreeably surprised by an inquiry I undertook into it. We possess at the present time 9 docks which can take Invincibles, Lord Nelsons, and all earlier ships, and 5 of these are suitable for our latest battleships. Lord Charles Beresford. Not in England. Churchill. Well, one is at Horbo Line. In a few months, there'll be 2 floating docks capable of taking larger size of ships which exist at present, and these 2 floating docks will be put, one in the Medway and the other possibly at Portsmouth. Early next year, a new lock capable of also being used as a dock will be built ready at Portsmouth, and another one also of the largest size will be ready in January 1914. In 1916, the 3 docks and lock at Rosyth, 4 in all, will also be available. Meanwhile, there are 5 private docks wide enough to contain the largest vessels ready, and 2 others now in the course of construction. In addition to these are 4 others which will take vessels of the Invincible class. That is, in the opinion of the Admiralty, sufficient provision for our needs at the present time. The question is being considered carefully whether pending the completion of docks at Rosyth, one of our floating docks, when ready, should not be towed to Cromarty and used there as a subsidiary base with floating workshops, pending the creation of the large base which is being developed on the northeast coast. Therefore, further provision for docks will be necessary in 1916 for needs of 1920, because we have to look 4 years ahead in regard to docks. But there is no cause for anxiety or complaint so far as the immediate future is concerned. Oh, fun. We're talking 1912, and we're talking when Charles Beresford is now in the House of Commons, heckling the First Sea Lord, Churchill. Gone Cameron, sounds like he would have been one of the sensible ones at the end of the Gordon meeting. Yes, he would have been. But so would Fisher. And so would Wilson. Oh, so what am I going to do now? Actually, I have to admit, I think I've probably covered all I wanted to say today. I was reckoning it was going to be a roughly 3 hours, and well, I've got 15, 20 minutes left. So, any questions? Anything you want to talk about with Beresford before I, call an evening and go walk, go give the big fluff his final walk of the day? That's the problem. Heckling is common in Parliament. Dan, you have just put your interesting things like that's what so sort of things stop things like poor families selling their children to feed the others, and the thing is, it's going to sound strange. You need to invest, and I got into this discussion today in the long patrol when I was recording it for Monday. The problem you get is you need to invest in infrastructure as well. And docks are investing in infrastructure. And to have the ships to operate the fleet. So, yeah, I get Beresford. And I get one of the interesting things, though, is I honestly feel there's often more substance to debates when I'm looking back in the 1900s and the 1930s and 20s and those sort of periods. There seems to be actually genuine substance in the debate rather than people repeating sound bites, which they hope will get repeated on the news. Sure, what would Beresford think of the F-35? Honestly, he'd probably be flabbergasted. He probably wouldn't have any concept of it at all. Would this guy have berated the Admiralty for failing to modernise Adrian's Hood if he was still alive in 1941? Yes. Didn't matter if he'd opposed Hood's construction; he'd have still opposed its not being modernised. Senator, at what point do the actions of the son reflect negatively on the father? Well, apparently his father's always quite indulgent of him, so yeah, he gets away with that. Desert Fox, what's your opinion of Woodrow Wilson and his legacy? Wilson has a lot of big ideas. Unfortunately, actually delivering them is problematic, and especially once he gets ill. Paul Beswick, how long should a modern First Sea Lord serve? I would like them to do 5-year terms. I think, honestly, I would like admirals to do longer in terms in their offices, because I think you need the stability, but also I think you need the experience. I think I would argue, in my view, that if you're going for a post like the First Sea Lord, it should be a case of you get promoted, you get the post. You get a year before you get the post, you get made assistant or deputy. It's basically an assistant first. You get transferred and you sit for a year. You shadow the current First Sea Lord, find out what they're doing, understand, and then you serve the post for 4 years. And then in your last year, of course, you get another one, so it passes on. So you maintain the institutional memory and knowledge. And I think you especially need to do that in smaller navies, because you need those skills to be passed on. You need the understanding, you need experience to pass on of how to deal with the jobs you're having to deal with, because the First Sea Lord now has to wear many hats. If we consider in this period there were 4 or 5 Sea Lords, they would each be arguing their case and their area. These days there are 3, sort of really 2, because the Third Sea Lord post is sort of, how do I put this politely? It's now called the Controller of the Royal Navy, and it tends to be a Rear Admiral. Current gentleman is James Parkin, who is really nice. I'm not sure if you'll ever remember having met me, but I did actually meet him a few years ago when he was definitely not a Rear Admiral. And they are very good, but they're called the Controller of the Navy. They used to always be the Third Sea Lord and Control Navy, but now they're the Controller. Just the Controller. And that is, whilst they still have the same role, there is something about having the title of Sea Lord that helps you with doing the political duties. Carmen, will Admiral Fisher start tweeting soon? That is, who knows? Me and Drac are in consultations with him about what he should be tweeting. Every so often, Beresford might raise an important point. It seems it is often by accident or tangential to his actual aim, but he is a useful figure in opposition, but needs to be kept far from power. I'd agree that one. Yellow Sage, entertaining evening. Still good. Also good night, and listen to some GNS HMS Pinafore before. Seems appropriate. Does do. Or else wrong. Schumacher, was there a nation's dreadnought fleet that Beresford did like? He seems to have been rather attached to the German one. He seems to actually like their designs. Cargoes, infrastructure, crewing the docks and ships, personal retention, and preferably also building for export. That's good. Heckling in Parliament at the time was a lot less common than today and was considered rude, especially when you were the one asking the question. Then you heckled the answer. Yeah, that's always fun. Rugosala, was he just the man of his times and class and on the bad end of the scale? Yes, he was. He was definitely on the bad end of the scale and definitely of his times and class. I think what would Beresford would have been apoplectic with Churchill for the loss of Hood. But there again, the point is, again, it's using a battle cruiser for a job which a battle cruiser shouldn't be doing. You've got a battle cruiser out hunting down a battleship. There's a Fox. Did the British have a version of the Reformers that the modern US has? They have different admirals take on reforming roles throughout a period. Fisher was the head of the Reformers for a period of what we would consider equivalent Reformers for his period. Anak, more substance in debates, no live coverage broadcasts on a possible relationship. Yeah. But there again, I actually like the live broadcasts, and I think council meetings and everything should actually be broadcast live as a default. I think even if you can't go and see them in person, you should be able to watch what your councillors and your local what your elected representatives have been saying on your behalf and how they've been voting. Mainly so that when it comes to election time, they can actually be held to account. Not that I expect many people will do, because most people are busy and don't have the time to go and watch all these things. But if you have those things made more easier to access, then more people will probably watch them, and that will inform the others with the rest of the people with the debate. Hood was a battle cruiser, Bijon. Hood was a battle cruiser. There was no such thing as a fast battleship when Hood was built. Hood was a battle cruiser. The equivalent of the equivalent battleship to the admiral class wasn't built. That's one of the interesting things. It was considered but wasn't started. And it's kind of like the G3s were started, and they would have probably been called a fast battleship had they later on in this war period. But they were a battle cruiser, especially if the equivalent battleships were being built. It's often a case that the battle cruisers would have similar level armor, although covering a far less, a smaller area of the previous generation's battleships. I see lots of people forget a lot of things about Hood. Sure, honestly, Beresford seems like a modern reform of the US school, which is anti-tech. Don't get me started on the US Navy and their anti-tech approach. At the moment, I'm getting quite annoyed with their destroyer program. That will be probably in next week's Bilge Pumps. Oh, good lord. What's going on in the world? Ben Freeman, is that all? Is it? There was a troop transport evacuating soldiers from France and Ireland would provide freedom to 5,000 aboard with heavy losses. The trouble is, that's probably the worst maritime disaster that would be classed as, because that's a mixed ship. You always have to watch out for the classifications, Dan, because people like to make classifications of things. And probably is the worst naval, as in single ship loss, as in a single warship loss, because those people all came from the naval side of the books. Whereas the troop transport, well, that was a merchant ship converted to the role, so it probably had a part civilian crew. Was it flagged as an RFA, or was it still under its merchant civilian crew? And all sorts of things go into it. I have covered it in the review on the other operations going on after Dunkirk. I've forgotten its name right now. I'm not sure if it's fair to say he's a man of his time. He seems to be an opinion of aristocratic superiority, whilst the wind was blowing towards a more meritocratic society. Yeah, he's more of a man out of his time by a couple hundred years. Paul Bestwick, was the Washington Naval Treaty as it's signed a big strategic mistake by the British Empire? Half a dozen one, six of the other. Half a dozen one, six of the other. At the time, it seems to make strategic sense in a limited capacity. Longer term, it causes a lot of problems because it means that they cannot build they cannot infrastructure and build their way out of recessions. They can't rebuild the navy. They can't do any of the things they would have done, and they have the navy they have going into World War II. Whereas if you'd not had it by World War II, the Royal Navy would have been very, very different than the fleet in World War One. Even with the recession, the economics, basically the governments would have gone, hang on, we can build as many ships as we like as a way of stimulating the economy. Let's build ships. Let's build infrastructure. If Clarke is rising, right, it wasn't something like that, the whole beneath the being exposed. What ships like? That does seem to be right, doesn't it? Lancastrian, thank you for reminding me to actually see the show. Hello, let's see whether this works. Don't it? That seems to be working now. Sorry about that, I have no idea, but the sound suddenly went off on the computer. I'm not sure why, and I don't know why. I had to end up disconnecting and reconnecting it. Sorry. Sorry about that. I said, no idea what happened. Sound just went. Ended up having to disconnect and reconnect. Anyway, if that's probably telling me I need to start packing up. And Beresford, have you tried turning off and on again? I have. I'm not sure. They just. I now have the fancy Spanchy edition version of XSplit. I have the actual paid for version because that seems sensible. And I still get sound issues, so I'm not sure what the problem is. I have a feeling sometimes I think it's the poor laptop just gets overloaded with everything. I don't know. Let's see. I try and keep all the wires away from each other so they don't interfere with each other, but no. Dalek, Dr. C is gone and new one, non-one is back. That's good. Sorry about that. Anyway. Yeah, that could be. The FRA is sending a gremlin to remind me of a walk. So thank you, Sharon. Sorry about the sound issues. Hope they'll be sorted out and won't happen again. It's going to be fun because it's going travelling soon. Don't joke, Derp Squad. My Windows has decided that the mouse on my microphone was in fact a mouse. I was asking, yeah, that sounded as if you had a massive lag. I'm not sure why. Down him. Oh no. Well, at the moment, my me and let's put it this way: I have a bet with myself that I'm going to end up having to pay for the trip to Canada, or at least a large chunk of the money for the trip to Canada. So I'm putting off buying the new rig, the new computer, till after I've worked out how I'm paying for that first. So take care, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone, for the super chats. Thank you very much for all the support and all the patrons and all the people who watch the videos and subscribe and all those things. So thank you very much for everyone on that one. And hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoyed the Long Patrol, which comes out on Saturday. That's it. How did Beresford react to the huge loss of life on the Free Battlecruiser Jutland? He was not happy and was shouting and shouting at a lot of people over it. Richard Richards. I spoke to a World War II Lancaster, the gunner, who told me the gremlins attacked his plane. It's huge. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. And I'm going to say good night. Thank you, Carl Gasberg. Thank you, Rick Falsava. Thank you, Strider. Thank you, Derp Squad. Thank you, Melanie640. Thank you, Dan Freeman and Sean for your adminning this evening. Thank you, Carmen Gasberg, Ablaski, Mitchell Oates. Thank you, Dirk Richards. Thank you, Dick Richards, I should say. And thank you, 96831. Thank you, Zachary Gherkin, Ablaski. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Matthias Slavic, thank you. Thank you, Not Wolf. Thank you, Jonathan Barrett. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John Ronan Cash. And thank you. Have a nice evening. Take care. Thank you, Rizal. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.